Welcome to Lovin' Life's Journey DIY. I'm Chantal and I'm so glad you're here. So here in Idaho, it is still definitely summer. We have had temperatures over 100 degrees for the past couple of weeks or in the high 90s, and so it's definitely feeling like summer. So I thought before I jump into fall DIYs, it would be fun to do another summer themed DIY video. So today's video, that's what we're going to do. So let's jump in and do some bee themed DIYs.
For this project, I will be using this unfinished wood hexagon tray that I picked up for $5 from Family Dollar. And I'll be using this super cute fabric that I found at Dollar Tree with the bees and the mason jars and the chicken wire design. I love that. It's so cute. I'll also be using some matte finish Mod Podge and a couple of these handles. I've had these for a while. I think I picked them up at Home Depot for, I don't know, between $1 and $2 each. And I forgot to say that I will be using some black chalk paint. This is Waverly chalk paint that I picked up at Walmart in the color ink. And so I'm just going to paint my tray using this black paint. Now, I didn't paint the bottom of the inside of the tray because I thought it might be better for adhering the fabric with the Mod Podge if I didn't paint it, but you could paint it if you want to, and it would probably be all right. Once my black paint is dry, I am going to go in with a little bit of linen white chalk paint and this chip brush and just put a very little bit of paint on the dry brush and go over my tray lightly just to give it some dry brushing marks. This just really adds some texture and gives it a little bit of a worn look. This is a great way to get that farmhouse look. Next, I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to lay it inside of my tray and just push it down and get it flattened out as best I can. Now, you could just set your tray on top of the fabric and trace around it, but then you would have to cut out your hexagon a little bit smaller so it would fit inside the tray. I decided to try it this way and it worked okay. I did have a couple of little places where my fabric was just a little bit too small, but overall it worked pretty well and you can't really tell once the tray's finished. So I'm just putting the fabric in and smoothing it out. Then I'm going to trace around it using a pencil and then cut out my hexagon. So I'm going to lay my fabric in the tray, make sure it fits and that it is the right direction. And then I am going to use my Mod Podge and put a generous layer of Mod Podge on the bottom of the tray. Then I will place my fabric on top of that and smooth it out. And I am using this tool that I use for my Cricut, but you can just smooth it out, even like using a credit card or something. To get any wrinkles out and smooth it into the edges and the corners. Then I'm going to take the Mod Podge and go over the top of the fabric with a generous coat and make sure to get all of the edges and corners sealed down really well. Next, I'm going to attach my handles, and to do this, I am going to use a combination of E6000 for a really strong hold and some hot glue just to hold it on until that E6000 can dry. So I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not measuring these, but I'm just centering it on one side. And then I will glue the other handle on straight across on the other side of the tray. And I love my finished tray. I think this would be so cute for serving tea with honey or just to use as a decorative tray on a table, but I'm really happy with this. For this next project, I am going to be using this cute little bee leaf lantern that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I think it's super cute, but I don't really like the bee on it. It looks a little kindergarten-ish to me, so we're going to upcycle this, and I am going to be using these bee-themed ribbons that I also got at Dollar Tree and some black chalk paint. I'm going to start out by painting the entire outside of this lantern using the black chalk paint. And I decided not to paint the inside of the lantern. If you do paint it, I would suggest painting it a light color. That will help kind of illuminate the lantern better. But I thought it would be kind of difficult to paint the inside, and so I opted just to leave it kind of the natural wood color. Once my paint is completely dry, I'm going to add some ribbon accents to this. And so I'm using this yellow ribbon that looks like it has little honeycombs on it. And I want to make sure that I get my ribbon level all the way around. So I'm just going to measure down a little ways on the lantern and put some marks all the way around just to use as a reference as I glue on this first row of ribbon. Then I'm going to take the same ribbon and I'm going to add a second row right below the first one that I just put on. And this one, obviously, I can just follow the edge of the first row of ribbon. Next, I'm going to take the white ribbon that has the little bees on it, and I am going to use it to put right down the center of those two yellow ribbons. This is going to cover up the seam, and those yellow ribbons are going to frame the white ribbon very nicely. This is really cute this way, but I decided I wanted to add a little messy bow to the front of this. And I had this black and white check ribbon with bees on it left over from bee-themed video that I did last summer. I will link that in the description box and the card above. But I decided to use a piece of that and then several of these other ribbons as well as this black and white check ribbon, and I'm just cutting some pieces of this to put together to make a messy bow. And I always like to cut the ends of my ribbon either with a V cut or at an angle. I think that this just gives them a much more finished look. Then I will just take all of my smaller ribbons and layer them on top of that wider ribbon. And then I'm going to take a black pipe cleaner and just use that to scrunch them and secure them in the middle. Once it's all secured, I'm just going to fluff out all of my ribbons and spread them out until I like the way it looks. I'm going to hot glue it to the front of my little lantern. And to finish it off, I'm going to add one of these little sunflowers that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I think that's just perfect. For this project, I'm going to be using this color your own mason jar decor that I got during the 4th of July and some of these tumbling tower blocks. I'm also going to be using this calendar that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use this design that has a bee theme. So I first took out that page from the calendar and I folded the edges over so that I could put it on my printer. And then I scanned it and I printed it a 5x7 size to fit on my little mason jar. Now there are some other options if you don't have this little wood mason jar sign. You can find some other mason jar shaped signs at Dollar Tree, especially during the fall. And I've also seen a galvanized uh, mason jar shaped sign as well. So I am just tracing around my design here so I can cut it out. And I just printed this on regular copy paper using my color inkjet printer, so nothing special. So I'm going to lay my paper cutout on top of my wood piece, and then I am going to make a mark where the lid of the mason jar would be, because I'm going to actually cut off the paper part that would be the lid, and I'm just going to keep the jar part. Next, I'm going to take my black chalk paint and I am going to paint just the lid part of the jar. And I am going to go just a little bit below so that I don't have any of the unfinished wood showing, but I'm not going to paint the whole front of the jar. Once the black paint is dry, I'm going to take a lighter gray paint. This could be a chalk paint or just an acrylic craft paint like I'm using here, and a dry brush. And I'm just going to dry brush a little bit from uh, side to side on the lid to kind of give it the look of having those ridges that like a jar lid would have. Next, I'm going to use my Mod Podge and I'm going to adhere my paper to the jar portion of the sign. And I find when using Mod Podge with paper, you don't want to get too much or it makes the paper soggy and it will tear easier when you're trying to kind of position it. But you do need to get enough on there that it's going to stick really well. And I did add a little bit of extra Mod Podge around the edges where the paper kind of wanted to come up. And you just want to try and remove any wrinkles or bubbles just as carefully as you can. I like using my little Cricut scraper tool for this, but even just smoothing it out with your hands can help with this. And if you have any paper that's hanging over the edge, a good way to clean this up is just to use a little bit of sandpaper. To make a little stand for my sign, I'm going to use some tumbling tower blocks. So I'm going to glue 2 blocks together end to end. And then I'm going to glue those to the back of my little jar sign at the very bottom. Now my sign's going to be a little wobbly still here, so I'm going to be adding a few more blocks. I'm going to add one in the center of the 2 that I just added, just to make that stand a little bit wider. And then to add a little bit extra weight, I'm going to add 2 more tumbling tower blocks right on top of those first 2 that I put on the sign. And this seems to make my sign pretty stable so that it stands up on its own. To make my sign look more finished, I'm going to paint the entire back, including the stand, with my black chalk paint. These two wooden beads were kind of an afterthought, so I didn't include them at the beginning of this DIY in my supplies that I was using, but I decided to take two wooden beads and paint them black to add as accents. And then I'm going to take some jute twine and I'm going to wrap it around toward the bottom of the lid about 3 times. Then I'll tie a knot and I'll add those wooden beads to the ends of the twine. And I just kind of played with how long I wanted the piece of twine with the bead on it, and then I just tied a knot so that that would hold the beads on. For this next DIY, I will be using this little hexagon shaped sign that I picked up at Dollar Tree in my last Dollar Tree haul video. And I'm going to be using some of these rub-on transfers. I'll be using the You Are a Wildflower design. And I'll be using this little bee laser cut shape, also from Dollar Tree. Oh, and I'll also be using some of this black and white checked ribbon, also from Dollar Tree. Since the back and sides of this sign are not finished, I am going to be using some black chalk paint and just painting all of the unfinished areas of the sign. So I'm going to use my heat gun to remove the label off of this. That is a really easy way to remove labels. And since there's some sticky residue on this, I'm just going to take some sandpaper and sand over it. And this will help take off some of that adhesive, and the sawdust from the sanding kind of takes away the stickiness as well. And then I'm just going to paint this so that all of the unfinished wood is black. Next, I'm going to take some yellow acrylic craft paint and I am going to paint the insides of these hexagons. And it did take a couple of coats to cover the design completely. To dress this up a bit, I'm going to take my black and white checked ribbon and just glue that along the entire outside edge of this sign. For the little laser cutout bee, I am just going to paint it all black. I'm not going to try and add any detail or anything to it. And I'm only painting one side because the other side will be glued down to the sign. To break up the yellow paint a little bit, I am going to use some black paint, watered down, and an old toothbrush, and I am going to flick some little specks of paint onto my project. And I would recommend practicing this if you have not done it before, so you can get the consistency of your paint right. And so you're just going to flick little specks on, and this is going to just give it some detail and break up that yellow and just make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to be using this You Are a Wildflower design, and I actually only want to use the words a and wildflower because I am putting the bee on there so it says be a wildflower. and then I'll also be using the little flowers. So I'm going to cut out my transfers, and then I am going to position them on my project. And I have found with working with these transfers that you want to pretty much get them positioned in the right place before you put any pressure on them at all, because they will stick and come off right where you put them down. So uh, just keep that in mind. And then I'm using my little Cricut scraper tool to go over the top, and then I'll just peel off that plastic. And to finish my little sign off, I will just use the little dab of hot glue and glue that laser cut bee right to that center hexagon. And now it says, "Be a wildflower." I hope you enjoyed these bee-themed DIYs. Let me know in the comments if you had a favorite one or if you're going to try to make any of them. And if you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button. It really helps my channel and helps other people get to see this video. If you are new to my channel or you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button for lots more DIYs on a budget. Also be sure to hit that notification bell and set your notifications so that YouTube will notify you every time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.